So we wrote a post recently on the key to successful e-commerce returns, and I think it's kind of an important underrated aspect of e-commerce. Returns and just operations in general. I think a lot of companies spend maybe a little too much time focusing on, the look and feel and people getting to the website, and not a lot of like, well, after they purchase, what happens? Like they might return stuff. They want to know that it's being tracked and that they want to have kind of like a good experience after they've clicked buy, and returns is a big piece of that. I think, fairly substantial part of e-commerce, orders do get returned. So I think it's something that you kind of have to like expect as part of your business model. In almost all cases, there's a few industries that can get away with no returns, but that's pretty
It's
rare.
certainly an area you don't want to neglect, right? There's five main phases of the e-commerce customer life cycle:
Yeah,
acquisition, conversion, fulfillment, retention, and analytics. This would go on kind of a hybrid between fulfillment and retention, right?
exactly. Yeah, because you fulfilled the item, but it's not really fulfilled because maybe they want to return something or get a exchange it. Like sometimes, or
New size.
exactly. I would agree. It's kind of it goes into that fulfillment retention process because if the return experience is bad, you're probably not going to come back. And what I think a lot of people don't realize with e-commerce is that a lot of the profit and money made in e-commerce is having that ability to get retention because it's fairly expensive to acquire new customers in e-commerce because it's so competitive. So you really need to retain them and get multiple sales in the future. So returns is a big piece of that. So let's kind of go through some of the basics of what we think, work here. And number one is just make it easy. I mean, whether that's, making it cheap or free or, having some sort of self-serve returns portal. A lot of, there are a lot of apps and tools that you can use where people can go on and type in their order number or kind of log into their profile and just, basically process the return like on the website very easily. There's lots of like Shopify apps and things like that that support that functionality. And then they basically all they have to do is kind of like print out the label, the shipping label, and send it to through FedEx or UPS or whatever it is. And I think if you can make it free, you should, even if maybe you take a slight loss, you just kind of have to factor that into your business model. I think generally people are not going to be super happy about paying for a return, just like you wouldn't want to pay for a return if you had to like go to the store and they're like, well, we're going to charge you a return fee. So
Definitely. It's better to incur the cost than rather inhibit your customer lifetime value.
exactly, because they might come back. I mean, I know from personal experience, people that I know very well that do a lot of returns, but it leads to a lot of business because they like, buy a lot of stuff that they know they might return one or two things, especially in like clothing and apparel. I think that's probably the most common. So I think it's also important to process it fast. I think, if you know that it's a super slow process, you're not going to get your money back for like 2 months. Like some of these companies are really slow with processing returns. It's kind of a turnoff because you're like, oh man, if I get this and it doesn't work out and it takes 2 months to return it and get my money back, it's kind of like, a bad taste in your mouth that you might not want to ever do that again.
Yeah, it's definitely a friction point during the checkout process,
Yeah,
right?
I'm just curious if you ever had that issue before. I'm trying to think of myself, but I've had friends and my girlfriend's complain about that with some of the clothes she's bought.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it helps eliminate the doubt in your head of wanting to do the purchase first and foremost. So
Yeah, exactly. So I think the biggest opportunity is, which we'll get into, is using it as an upsell process. So there are a lot of tools and tricks and apps and things out there that can allow you to like either make it so that you can give an exchange. So instead of just like losing the purchase or them doing a full return or whatever it is, maybe you offer a slight coupon code if they exchange it. So, hey, if you exchange this for something else, we'll give you 10% off. Or, hey, if you, buy more, do something, they might, find a way to kind of basically like upsell them in the exchange process. And you're seeing that at extreme level where I think even like the Wayfair or not Wayfair, like Amazon's and Walmart's are like for smaller items, they're like, hey, don't even return it. We're just going to let you keep it, which is pretty crazy. That's even like, that's cheaper for them to do that than to have people return it. And they're doing that as more of like a loss leader. But there are a lot of ways to kind of like use it as an upsell opportunity, because you're essentially like, okay, now you're back in touch with the customer. They're returning something. They're going back to your website to follow the returns process. Maybe you give them something to do something.
Another opportunity to get your products in front of them and to close another deal.
Exactly. And I think it's also a way to grow average order value, because if people know that they can, return things easily, then they're less scared about, okay, well, if I spend $500, but I return $100, like, at least I know that I can return some stuff. There's more willingness to spend more. And if you can increase your average order value, that's incredibly valuable for marketing and everything. So, like your average sale is worth more. So,
right. It gives the customer peace of mind when they're checking out.
Yeah, exactly. Like, okay, I know I can return it for free. I know they're going to process it pretty fast. I know their returns portal is easy to use. I mean, Amazon's probably like the best example of that. Like, people know, like, okay, I can just like go on, click a few buttons, print out the label, right? I think the label's free usually, and then basically you just gotta like package it up and send it back.
Yeah, e-commerce is all about reducing friction. So upgrading your customer service is a great place to start for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, is that I think there is a big customer service element of this. You might need like chat, like, we didn't write that in the blog post, but having some human touch to this, could be really valuable depending on the situation, or, especially if it's an important customer or whatever it may be. So I agree that the whole customer service aspect of this is also important, because sometimes you might actually need to talk to someone.
Yeah, but as you mentioned, there's a ton of apps that already exist out on the marketplaces today that can help e-commerce businesses streamline that process.
Absolutely. Yeah. Returnly is kind of, I think, one of the more popular ones. Return Logic and Return Magic are two other ones we see. And I think there's a bunch more that, we're not naming, but they're definitely out there in the market. So I think it's definitely something that I don't think you necessarily have to build from scratch. I think you can, find a solution in the market and kind of, use something out there. And obviously there's costs to implementing that, but it's less than, building it from the ground up.
Right.